Good afternoon. We are looking at Proverbs today, Proverbs chapter 15, verses 21 through 26. Um, as we typically do, I will read for you in Hebrew. We've got Hebrew poetry. So from time to time, rhyming things or alliteration, words sounding like other words can be something that comes up. We'll listen to the Hebrews to make sure that we're not missing any of those fun little tidbits. Kol Yamei Ani Ra'im Vetob Lev Misteh. No, I'm sorry, Mishteh Tamid. Um, Yom would be day, so Yami is days. So Kol, all the days of the afflicted are evil. Now, afflicted, we've got. I better check if I'm in the right spot here. Let's see here. I got Proverbs 15. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong verse here. Let's start over. Verse 20. 21. I apologize. I read the wrong verse. Okay. Ivelet Simha Lahasar Lev Veis Tebuna Yeyaser Laket, or Locket, probably Locket. Uh, excuse me. Um, we have two nouns in a row, which is kind of unusual. Maybe it's just folly and joy. So to him who is lacking discernment, I'm trying to make sense of this first verse here. Okay, folly. They go folly as a joy. That's strange. Well, and it's interesting too because the endings of the adjectives and then the other noun, there's no verb in this sentence, right? So we basically have two nouns, an adjective, and then another noun. I should say the first phrase, not the first sentence of verse 21. So I'm sure that there's some kind of grammatical rule here that I can't remember. With two nouns in a row like that, I bet you there's some kind of example that is the reason for this. So folly is the joy of him who is lacking discernment, and I don't think we mean joy here in the sense of is a folly is a joy to him who lacks discernment. So what is folly? Well, folly is the opposite of, the best way to describe it probably would be to describe, like, well, what is wisdom, right? Um, Wisdom is a fear and knowledge of the Lord. Wisdom is seeking after things that are godly, that are righteous. Wisdom is following, is being immersed in the scriptures, but also operating your life in a manner that is in keeping with God's will. Uh, someone who someone who follows the commandments, who does the Torah, the first five books of the Pentateuch. This would be someone of wisdom and who has a fear and knowledge of the Lord. So folly is the opposite of all that, right? Folly would be someone who seeks after maybe his own needs or seeks after pleasure and righteousness in the world as opposed to God's word. Folly is someone who does what is evil in the sight of the Lord. Folly is someone who, or is something, a lot of times we've noticed in Proverbs that folly is often described as someone who's also ignorant, just like mentally ignorant. And someone who oftentimes folly is also spoken of, or ignorance, is someone who's loud, who doesn't listen, who talks over people, who argues, who says, a stupid person says stupid things, right? That's part of it as well. So, so someone who lacks discernment, who, discernment seems like it'd be lacking wisdom, right? Like discernment would be the ability to maybe on past evidence, past history, to make good judgments, right? So someone who doesn't have that ability to make basically good judgments, folly is their joy, right? But a man of Tibuna understanding uprightly walks. I'm not sure what to make of this verse. It almost seems like a filler verse. Like this is all stuff we've talked about before. It's not a bad verse in and of itself. I'm not sure how it fits into the context of the larger whole. And what specifically, other than the things we've talked about, what specifically the psalmist or the proverb writer is trying to get at here. I mean, these concepts seem fairly straightforward. A man of Tibuna walks uprightly. Well, maybe diving into Tibuna real quick would be beneficial to us. Tibuna, a man of understanding, discernment, reasoning. Let's look at a discretion, intelligence. No. Well, why don't we head on to the next one then? Verse 22. Go awry, or haper mahasabot, ba'en sa'od, uberob, yoasim, think, yovaasim maybe, takum. Yeah, it'll be yovaasim, yovaasim, yeah. Takum, excuse me. Okay, so this is Hayfield infinitive abstract. From what verb here? To break or to frustrate. Break off, cast off, cause to cleanse, clean, defeat, disannul, disappoint. To break up. Oh, okay, so maybe something like broken our plans without counsel, or in the process of being broken, or what does the ESV say? Without counsel, plans fail. Okay, so they go more the translation route. Without make more smooth it out, make more sense of it. Without plans, well, I'm sorry, without counsel, plans fail. Or literally, it would be broken or breaking our plans without counsel. So you can see how we get the English out of that. Without counsel, plans are broken. But in the multitude of counselors, they are established or made strong. Probably more like a sense of made firm or made strong. To rise, to stand up. to rise. Help, hold, make good. Raise up. Okay. Verse 23. Well, I mean, so 22, just to finish that off, 22 doesn't necessarily talk about evil. Maybe it's talking more in terms of godly advice or wisdom. Um, Jesus talks about this. Who does not count the cost, right? When going to war with the enemy, doesn't count the cost first, and first sue peace if necessary. This kind of idea. So, yeah, when we make plans, what we should have wise counsel. We should think about these things before we go ahead and go forward with them. But in a multitude of counsels, in other words, when you seek advice, these plans are established. That seems pretty straightforward. Yeah, I mean, different perspectives on problems are always helpful. Especially, you never know who you contact might have experience with the problem itself, or a special wisdom that none of us have. There's all sorts of reasons to seek out the counsel of other people. It's a hard thing, just on a tangent for a moment. It's a hard thing sometimes as a leader to know how much to do of each. At times, I think a congregation is looking for you to lead, and they want you to take first steps. I can honestly, probably to my detriment at times, wonder too much what other people are thinking, and be a man of too much counsel and not enough action. I think there's a place in between, because we can be too careful, right? Where we're constantly seeking out more and more information as though, um, you know, so the scriptures, the commandments, they give us a path to walk. They give us a very clear understanding of who we are and how we should act in all circumstances, right? So perhaps you come up against a situation where acting appropriately according to the Ten Commandments or the scriptures is going to be painful. It happens, right? Staying true to God's word often causes conflict in the world, right? So we just know, and so we keep seeking out advice and seeking out advice, perhaps looking for a way out or looking for an easier path, looking for an easier way to go about things. When sometimes the truth is just right there in front of us, we're avoiding it because the truth is hard. So, I think there's something here, just this idea that there probably has to be a balance. I think in all of our lives, when making hard decisions, when living, right? That we as human beings are never going to have perfect knowledge. You're just never going to know every aspect of a problem or a thing before you enter in. And to think that we would expect that could be debilitating and could cause us to be constantly questioning our decisions and never, um, you know, why do we question our decisions? That's a good question, right? Like, why? Why? And the answer is because we probably want to be deemed right in all of our decisions. We want the future to speak of us well. We want the people who rely upon us to think we are intelligent, wise, smart, these kinds of things. Um, but the reality is that we are put here to do things for other people. We've been saved by Christ. He's given us everything that we need, and now our lives are in service to others. So sometimes I have to be willing to make a hard decision and also make it in a timely fashion, because that's what my neighbor needs. Not only a hard decision made, but a hard decision made in a timely fashion. My neighbor can't sit around and wait for 3 years for me to consider every single facet of this problem. In the meantime, my neighbor is suffering, possibly even dying, and I'm doing nothing while I'm trying to figure out which way to go. There is not This is not a license to say, like, verse 22 is very clear, like, you need to plan ahead. At the same time, we are a people of action, you know We're not a people who sit and consider every possible permutation before we ever act, because in the meantime, uh, suffering, what's the word, multiplies, and that also is great evil. So the truth is, since we're sinful and our ability to have complete knowledge is imperfect at best, our whole lives. When we do this every single day, we make small decisions. We make decisions about what route to go to work, what tires to put on our car, what cereal to buy for our kids. We make all these decisions without every single fact at hand. This is human life. We do this, right? We have to. And sometimes, perhaps, even the bigger choices, we have to go into them realizing that I can't possibly know every single detail about this problem. I have to make a choice. And I should pray for wisdom. I should pray for guidance from God. I should pray that He would give me clarity and maybe even perhaps communicate to me somehow that this is the right call. But at the end of the day, also remember that I am forgiven in Christ. I am a child of heaven and an heir of all eternity. So even if I do make the wrong choice, like I'm thinking of things kind of like a mortgage or a car or maybe even a career choice, you know, you get into a career, you're making money, but you're not happy. It's like, well, you're still a child of God, and maybe you don't want to be a plumber anymore, but it's what pays the bills, what keeps your family in food, and someday eternity will even make your 50 years of service that in something you didn't want to do make sense, right? Like, so we make decisions based on the limited information that we have or that we can store in our brains. We trust in God. We ask for guidance from Him, obviously. In fact, if He could give us clarity, that's better than our choices in general. And to be frank, how many times have I made poor choices because I wasn't listening? I mean, that's probably the far greater problem than being uninformed, right? I usually have the information at my fingertips. That's not the problem. The problem is I'm not listening to what God's telling me. Maybe you can identify with that. Regardless, I think choices are choices. They're made. It doesn't define you as a person. The scriptures do. Christ does. His blood does. Right? That defines you as who you are. You're a Christian. You're a child of God. Your decisions do not. Um, they can be overcome. They can be changed, or in the light of eternity, they can be outweighed. Let's go on. Okay, verse 24. Ora hayim lemaha. I'm sorry, lemala. Excuse me. Lemaskil. Lemash. Oh, actually, sorry, lemaskil. Lema'an sur misaol matah. So Haim, life, you probably recognize that one. The one thing you hear a lot in like media is L'chaim, right? And La is two, and Chaim is life. So Chaim here, life, we understand that word, right? Ora is the way, that's a noun, the way of life. Goes upward, winds upward, goes up. Let's see, what does ESV have? The path of life leads upward. Okay. Word two, lemaskil, four or two, probably four. For the wise, for the prudent, we have prudent here, wise. What do we have here in the ESV? Yeah, for the prudent, that's what they used. Skillful, good success. So What do you think that means? The way of life, the path of life winds upwards for the wise. I'll give you a one right away. I think that makes sense. In a Hebrew mindset, they would kind of think, it would be in the back of their head. Whenever you go to Jerusalem, you're always going up. Whether you're coming from the north or the south, when you go to Jerusalem, you go up, right? You go up to Jerusalem. So, and then Jerusalem, of course, is seen as kind of a stand-in for the idea of Zion. Now, Jerusalem isn't Zion, right? But in many ways, it is, right? Like in totality, Jerusalem's not Zion, but there are plenty of ways that Jerusalem is like a type of Zion. It's where King David ruled. It's where God sat on the throne, right? The temple was in Jerusalem. God was sitting on the Ark of the Covenant in the temple. So God dwelled there, which the scriptures talk about God dwelling in Zion. But in a lot of ways, Jerusalem isn't Zion. Well, I mean, we see in the Gospels, there's bad people who do bad things there. There's lying, cheating, all kinds of stuff that happens in Jerusalem that isn't good, that makes it not Zion. But it's supposed to kind of stand there as like to give us some kind of inkling of what Zion is, right? God's holy city. So I wonder if in the back of your mind, when you talk about your way winding upward, you wouldn't. It would. I think it would naturally come to your mind this idea of thinking about going up to Jerusalem, right? Um, and then perhaps it's as simple as this. We have in the second part of the sentence, we have a below word, right? So we're thinking of down and up, literally in terms of good and bad, or down and down, bad and good, respectively. So going up is kind of the positive idea, going up towards God, towards heavens, towards Jerusalem, however you want to phrase it. Going down is going away from Jerusalem. It's going down to Sheol. It's going down where evil happens. Um, yeah. So I think that would be just a very simple way of thinking of it, right? Going up to Jerusalem, going up to heaven, and think of something like the ascension. You think of something like like the incense that's burned, prayers to God that ascends up into heaven. So it's the heavens are there, but not also too God is there. So going upwards is going towards God in this context. Just interesting to think like, so they're sending all their prayers up to heaven. They're sending the incense up to heaven. They're addressing a God of the heavens, and then John like flips that around and says, well, the God of the heavens, who you want to send things up to, now he's come down to be amongst you, right? So it's kind of a flip flop of that, which is interesting. We were just talking about this in John chapter 6 in Bible study downstairs, and so it's kind of like fresh in my mind as we're going through Old Testament stuff. So then we have okay. So in verse 24, we don't have two separate people. We have one general idea for one man, right? Uh, the way of the why. So in other words, like maybe it's back to like uh, Solomon putting before his son. Here's all the wisdom of the Lord. Make good choices, right? So don't go down where the harlot lives and lay in her bed. No, follow the way of wisdom and go that direction, right? So it's kind of the same thing here. Go, follow the path of life upwards. Don't follow it as it says here, that he may turn away from the hell below, right? So pick the path upwards towards heaven, not the one that leads down to Sheol, right? And you know what? I think this is, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is Sheol here, isn't it? It is. Look at that. I just mistaken it because of the name. The mem Mishaol is the mem. The M sound is actually a preposition. That's where you get the from, right? But yeah, it's just Shaul after that. So from hell below. That's also interesting too because we have this metaphor in our Christian understanding that like hell is kind of below our feet. It's down. God is up, the heavens are up, the hell is down. We have this instance that I know of, and then of course Jonah talks about going down into the deep where Shaul is when he's in the belly of when he's in the belly of fish, and the fish goes down deep, and he speaks of of going down into the depths of Shaul. So, maybe just a simple thought here, verse 24, replacement theory. Not replacement theory. That's loaded actually. My thought process of resisting temptation, right? I mean, one of the first things we would do if I was counseling someone and they were struggling with a certain temptation or vice, I would encourage them to replace it with something else, right? Whatever that might be. But try to find a healthy alternative because we're not going to necessarily change the behavior tomorrow. Can we modify that behavior towards something better? Almost seems like that's what it's saying here. Is like, hey, you're going to follow the path upwards, so you don't follow the path downward, right? Like we're almost like just going to say you're kind of at the whims here, so follow the one upwards. That's going to be a better place for you to be at the end of the day. You got to pick. In other words, you got to pick one of them. So 24, or I'm sorry, 25. And I believe, no, two more verses, 25 and 26. Beit Gelim Yasa Yahweh, Veyaseb Gebul Almana. Beit, the house, Geim of the proud, will destroy Yahweh, but he will establish the boundary of the widow. I'm thinking boundary is probably something like defenses or but maintains the widow's boundaries. Okay. Okay. So this is so we have two masculine singular nouns. That's the complicated part. Will destroy is our verb. It's an imperfect verb, so a very straightforward third masculine singular verb. So first is I, second person is you in the singular, right? So I, you, and then third person would be he, right? So the house can't destroy Yahweh. That's pretty straightforward. And if it's a masculine singular, which Yahweh is, then so the word order is literally the house of the proud will destroy Yahweh, right? So we have to know. Here's a point where we have to know grammar a little bit here, where the verb has a third masculine singular ending. We have to find a noun with a masculine singular ending as well. Yahweh has a masculine singular ending, of course, that makes sense, and it would make sense then that the house of the proud of the proud is an adjective, obviously. So the house is our object, right? So who's the subject? Yahweh. Yahweh will destroy what? The house of the proud. Yeah. That's how we would kind of divine out. That's why the translation goes that way, even though the word order is very different, right? So Yahweh will destroy the house of the proud, but he will establish. And by when the Old Testament talks about establishing something, our English understanding of it would be they're going to establish a presence, in this area, or a new establishment, right? But the idea, I think, like the best idea would be kind of in a warfare sense. You're going to establish a beachhead. Well, you're not going to establish a beachhead in a foreign war, in the enemy's territory, to then just turn around and give it up, right? No, you're going to establish it to keep it. So I think that's what's going on here. So not only will he make that boundary, begin it, but he also plans on keeping it firm, right? So he destroys the house of the proud, but establishes the boundary of the widow. Now, the obvious comparison here then is that against the proud and the widow, right? So, Gaim, Gaia, proud, haughtiness, on everyone who is proud and make him low. So there's definitely, this is not a neutral proud. This is a proud that is one of superior. I'm superior to you. I'm proud, and I think I'm better than you, right? And that comes from people who are haughty, people who take advantage. So this is the comparison. What is the widow? Well, in this culture, the widow is kind of the bottom rung, right? The widow is someone who doesn't have someone to take care of her. She is by herself. Probably since she can't have a job of her own, she's probably poor. She is dwelling upon the resources or the help of another. Yeah. So this is the situation of the widow. Okay. Verse 26, last verse today. Toabat, we've had this one before. Toabat, Yahweh, Masabot, Ra Utehorim, Imre Noam. Okay. So very roughly, it would be like, are an abomination to Yahweh the thoughts of the wicked. Very rough sentence, doesn't make a lot of sense. So probably something more along the lines of the thoughts of the wicked are an abomination to Yahweh, right? But the words of the pure are pleasant. I would assume too that we're going to say like something like pleasant to him, right? To reference Yahweh at the beginning. Nope, the ESV just goes, the gracious words are pure. And, I don't want to spend a lot of time dwelling on the thoughts of the wicked. I don't think it's healthy, or I don't think it's a rewarding enterprise for us. I think it doesn't take a lot of imagination for us to think about what are the thoughts of the wicked, right? I think wicked could have meanings along the lines of greed, lust, or anger, right? Maybe more that I'm forgetting, right? But so if we go down those logic trains, right? What are the kinds of things we do for money? What are the kind of things we do for lust? What are the kind of things we do for, what did I say? Maybe anger, out of vengeance, or maybe out of seeking power, right? What are the things that we do? These are abominations, right? Um, and perhaps we could talk a little bit about ambition, just to. So I've been struggling with myself quite a bit lately. Um, how ambitious should we be as Christian people? I don't know. I think to a certain extent, if you're asking God to give you something and you haven't really done anything with what you already have, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Why is God going, like you think of the parable of the talents, right? We've got a guy with 5 talents, 3 talents, 1 talent. Why is he going to, he takes the 1 talent away from the one man, gives it to the man with 5, because that man has already proven that he can handle what he already has. To much who is given, much will be required. So I think one of our greatest problems, I mean, there's a lot of things to deal with in the world that we live in, right? I mean, persecution isn't that much right now. We don't deal with a lot of persecution, but I think the greater problem is apathy and laziness. Um, there is so much stuff right now to put in front of your eyes that uh, we can lazy our whole lives away. So, what is it that we should be doing? Think about this in my own life. If I want more responsibility, more and greater work, let's say, how can I justify that to my God when perhaps I'm not doing the things that I need to do right now? Why is he going to give me more when I haven't proven worthy of the things I already have? Too much who is given, much will be required. How is that different than, you know, thoughts of the wicked, desires, plans? Um, I think that there is a definitive line between ambition and evil, and the line is fairly clearly that when we're seeking to serve ourselves as opposed to serve God or our neighbor, and by serving our neighbor, we serve God. So I mean, they're virtually the same thing. Yeah, I think that's actually a really, really good place to stop. Our lives are one of service. We've been saved and given great grace and mercy. So we don't need to worry about working out our own salvation before God anymore. Our only responsibility is to love our neighbor as ourselves in many and various ways. It's not that simple. Well, I mean that is the crystal truth, but I mean, of course, it works out in so many ways. But we are here to be servants to our neighbor. Now, if we have an ambition to do that in new and greater and more wonderful ways, well, this is good. But if their desires for personal reasons or things, these are the things that God's probably not going to listen to. We talked about it last time. I just can't help but do it again since we're on the topic. And I'm at this point just way off the ranch here on a tangent. But, verse 4 of Psalm 37, delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. So verse 3 before that is trust in the Lord and do good, dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. You can take that verse out of context and say the Lord wants to give me everything that I want to have. And the truth is the Lord wants to give you everything he wants to give you. What he wants is for you to wrap your mind around that and come to his understanding. He wants you to want the things that he wants to give you. And sometimes that's hard, like perhaps you think you're floundering. Perhaps you think that you're, not achieving or you're stalled. And in the meantime, you're continuing to trust in God even in difficult circumstances. You're in your scriptures. You're at church regularly. You're receiving the sacrament regularly. You're being fed, and you're growing in faith. You might even be part of a church that's not growing in numbers. Maybe even the opposite. Maybe you're part of a church that's like shrinking in numbers, but you're growing in faith. Well, you're wrapping your mind around the things that God actually wants to give you. And that is a good thing. Now, I don't know. Some of the thoughts I'm rolling around in my brain, thinking about a lot right now. So we did verses 21 through 26 of Proverbs 15. We will catch you next week. Thank you so much for being with us today. And Lord bless you and keep you.